Wired.com presents The Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. And here is your host, David Barr Kirtley.
Hello, and welcome to episode 556 of Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. I'm David Barr Kirtley, author of the book Save Me Please and Other Stories. Publishers Weekly says, visceral settings and robust characters will have readers marveling at how much Kirtley is able to fit into a limited page count. For SFF fans with no time to sink into a doorstopper, these concentrated doses of genre goodness will hit the spot. And Kirkus Reviews writes, Kirtley employs sharp, concise prose that complements his puckish sense of humor. The author's passionate voice breathes life into this wonderful array of tales. So again, the book is called Save Me Please and Other Stories, and it's available now on Amazon.com. And today on the show, we'll be discussing Seasons 1 and 2 of the Apple TV Plus series For All Mankind, an alternate history in which the Soviet Union beats the United States to the moon. And this will include spoilers for everything in Seasons 1 and 2, so just be aware of that. And I'm joined by 3 guests. So first up, we've got our producer, John Joseph Adams. He's the editor of Lightspeed Magazine, and the series editor of the Best American Science Fiction and Fantasy, and he's also edited more than 40 other anthologies. His most recent projects are the Amazon Original Stories collection The Far Reaches, featuring stories by James S. A. Corey, Veronica Roth, John Scalzi, Nydia Corafor, Rebecca Roanhorse, and Ann Leckie, and It's Out There Screaming, an anthology of new black horror, which he edited with Jordan Peele. So, John, welcome back.
Hey, always good to be here. I also brought my puckish sense of humor.
Then next up, we've got Sara Lynn Michener, making her 27th appearance on the show. She's the author of many essays, mostly on the intersection between fandom, science fiction, feminism, and social justice, with titles such as Science Fiction Often Wins the Bechdel Test by Breaking It, which is part of its job. She's also the chief creative officer at Lightburn Software, so she has access to an army of laser cutters, and she just finished pulling off the company's first convention. So Sarah, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here.
And also joining us today is Rafael Jordan, making his 17th appearance on the show. He's written over 25 feature films, including Lost Colony, The Legend of Roanoke, The Immortal Voyage of Captain Drake, and Star Runners. He also co-created and co-wrote Salvage Marines, a space opera series starring Casper Van Dien and Peter Shinkoda, and he's also the lead guitarist of Viscera, an LA-based rock band who provided music for the series. So, Rafael, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me back.
Okay, so John, this is the first time we're having you on the show since the news came out about your anthology Out There Screaming.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
So I just want to give you a chance to quickly tell people about that.
Sure, yeah. Like Dave said, it's an anthology I co-edited with Jordan Peele, which was a pretty incredible experience to be able to do. It's just an original horror anthology of featuring all black authors. So the Peele people, Peele and his team, I should say, they came up with the project and pitched it to a publisher and sold it and stuff, and then they wanted to pair up with an editor who had a lot of experience doing short stories and stuff, and so I was fortunate enough to be selected, and it just went really great. It was a wonderful experience. Jordan and his whole team is great. He and I did not become best friends, alas, but it was a very, very cool experience, and so hopefully I get to do more stuff like that.
Yeah, and this is a New York Times bestseller, right?
Yeah, that was also very cool. We got right at the bottom of the list, number 15. That that's the bottom that gets printed in the paper. But like number 15 for an anthology is like number 1. I mean, anthologies don't get on the New York Times bestseller list, so that was a tremendous win.
Well, because I remember when The Living Dead came out, it made it onto the extended list, so just kind of missed being on the actual list.
Yeah.
So. Glad you finally made it. That's a.
It was actually I think maybe it was either months later, or like maybe almost a year later after that actually happened with The Living Dead, because it was like right before Christmas or something, and it was like it was a weird time for it to have happened. It's just that there was like a huge influx of sales at that whatever that time was. It wasn't like right when
So
it came out.
it
Yeah.
kind of like rose from the dead, you might say.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So yeah, everyone check that out. Again, it's called Out There Screaming. Okay, but so let's get into our show for today. So Sarah, kind of what were your expectations going into For All Mankind?
It's hard to remember because this came out years ago, and I was on board from the moment that I saw the first trailer. And this is really when, Apple TV Plus kind of came out. Like I remember they launched, I think, with C, and they very quickly, made it very clear that they were emphasizing science fiction. And I loved that. It was almost like I thought of it as a science fiction streaming channel. Like I was aware that they had other shows and great shows, like Ted Lasso, for instance, totally different, but, great show. But I thought of it as, oh yeah, I know Apple TV Plus is about science fiction, obviously. So yeah, I was completely on board with the premise and, loved it right out of the box.
Yeah, I guess I'll explain if you don't know that. So as we're recording this, season 4 has just started airing, but I'd never seen this show, and I figured that 3 or 4 seasons would be too much material to cover in one episode. Usually we talk about one season of TV or sometimes 2. So I figured we would break this up into 2 panels. So we're just going to talk about seasons 1 and 2 in this one, which I just watched, and then we'll come back at a future date and talk about seasons 3 and 4, which I have not seen yet. So nobody's say any spoilers for seasons 3 or 4. But so do you remember, Sarah, this was a series from Ronald D. Moore, who was the
Star Trek.
sort of the creator of, he worked on Star Trek, but I think he's best known as the creator of the Battlestar Galactica remake that came out around in the early 2000s sometime. So kind of how did you, did that affect how excited you were for the show or what your expectations were?
I think I remember, it's hard to remember because it's been a couple years, and I feel like it came out around the start of the pandemic or something. I'm not entirely clear on that, but I think as soon as I recognized the name in the credits, I was like, woo, and to have the guy that, worked on The Expanse and Star Trek in there as well. That starts with an N that I cannot remember.
Well, it's Naren Shankar. I know that because
Yes.
I interviewed him a couple years ago. So, which is a great interview, by the way, if anyone wants to go check it out. But yeah, Expanse, awesome show if you haven't seen it. But yeah, so he's also on this as a executive producer. So some big names in the world of science fiction TV on this show. And how about John? What were your expectations going into this?
I didn't really have a ton of expectations initially. Like I saw it, I saw it pop up on Apple TV, and I didn't really know anything about it. Once I started I hadn't seen trailers or anything. I didn't even know that it was coming. And then so when I first started watching it, and I saw that Ron Moore was the creator, I was initially a little trepidatious because we loved him for many years as he was running Battlestar Galactica, but then he fumbled at the goal line. And so that scarred me for a long time.
You're not
I feel
wrong.
like yeah. I feel like I've forgiven him now though, because this show is so good. But we've been burned before. No, but this is the kind of show that it's like it seems like the kind of fumble that happened in Battlestar Galactica. That's not going to happen with this show. It just seems it would be ridiculous. There's no reason for that. There was no reason for Battlestar Galactica, but let's admit bygones be bygones. We love you now, Ron. But yeah, I really like Joel Kinnaman, so I was like excited to see this kind of like premiere science fiction show on the air, and like to be basis have a basis in an alternate history. I thought was cool. And as I was watching it, I got really more excited about it as I saw that the show was more than just alternate history of the space program. It was like taking that as the starting point and then really telling a lot of like really science fictional stories. yeah, I got very excited about it very quickly, and like the first episode's amazing. So I mean, if you watch the first episode and you don't like it, I don't know what's wrong with you, but you probably won't like the show.
Yes. So like I said, the basic premise is that it's an alternate history where the Soviet Union beats the United States to the moon, and this results in a vastly accelerated or intensified space race and vastly accelerated development of space technology and space exploration. So that and I don't think it's a spoiler to say that the show jumps a decade every season. So you're seeing this big sweep of history of this alternate history scenario. So that's really cool and kind of like pretty unique in terms of science fiction TV, at least that I can think of. But so how about Rafael? What were your expectations going in?
I didn't know anything about the show, and at the time, I wasn't that high on Apple TV. But Sarah's right. Apple TV Plus has some of the best sci-fi shows. After all, we all just did that Silo conversation not long ago. But once I saw it was a Ron Moore show, obviously I'm a big fan of his, and I don't know, we'll have to have a separate conversation about this so-called fumbling. I don't know. But I love how this show thematically
you might be in the minority on that one, on that panel, Rafael.
Maybe. But I love how this show is kind of thematically a prequel to Star Trek, and he's kind of acknowledged as such that Star Trek posits this fantastic future that we all want to get to, but how do you get there? And this show kind of lays out the groundwork for that. And the alternate history thing is really cool. I didn't know that's what it was, but within 2 minutes, you kind of know, and you're like, wow, that's a great hook. And I love every season is a different decade motif, even though at some point it's totally going to age out these actors, but it's working so far.
It's funny. It's like I kind of wish I could get people to just watch the show without ever telling them that it's alternate history, because and I mean, like, you can like see the poster for it on the I don't know what do we call these things that the little box on Apple. What do we call these things in the streaming services? Whatever, the poster. When you see that, like, you don't know what it is, but if you read anything about it, it's like it clues you in. But it's like just the beginning of the show is like so great. Like, I mean, imagine if you didn't know at all that it was going to be that. But even so I rewatched it in prep for the panel, and even though I had known that it was alternate history, obviously, I had forgotten like how they laid the groundwork, like right from the start, where it's like it was just masterfully done. Like they're showing you like the landing on the moon. They're showing like the people's reactions to it, and they're showing all these Americans, and like it's really interesting how even knowing that it was about the Soviets getting to the moon first, like, just rewatching it, it's just like I experienced it like kind of fresh all over again, where it's like, and you get to really appreciate like how like subtly done they did it, where it's like, you can see Joel Kinnaman's character, who's an astronaut, sort of reacting in this strange way, and like you can kind of think like, oh well, he's mad that he didn't get to be up there on that mission, but then you realize, like, a few minutes later, it's like, oh well, he's mad because the Soviets have beat the Americans to the moon. And there's like a lot of stuff like a lot of really subtle stuff like that in those first moments. So I thought that was really well done.
Absolutely. I got really lucky. I didn't know it was alternate history, and I just turned it on. I think it was early in the pandemic. I was a little late to the party, maybe. I just heard it was a good show. And yeah, within 2 minutes, you're like, oh, wow. Okay.
Well, and Rafael, you're a big space fan, right? I mean, I remember there was this thing. I mean, I don't think it was totally serious, but there was this thing you could sign up for a one-way trip to Mars, and you were like, yeah, I would totally go take a one-way trip to Mars.
Oh, absolutely. What was that called? Mars One? That was about a decade ago. Yeah. You have a good memory. I totally threw away $38 and a processing fee, I think. I knew it was never going to happen, but I wanted to be involved in like whatever the fake reality show was going to be. Because, like as they trained all the Martian astronaut candidates, they were going to film it, and that's how they were going to finance the whole mission, supposedly. It didn't make any sense, but I was like, you know what, if I can get chosen, why the hell not?
But did you grow up like reading about NASA and stuff like that?
Oh, definitely. My dad was really into, Star Trek and Star Wars, and my mom kind of cultivated my love of astronomy and space. And so, yeah, I grew up with a lot of those NASA picture books and stuff, and
Mm.
then studied astrophysics in college. I thought I was going to go into the space program, to be honest. And then
Oh.
I just did a quick pivot
Hmm.
into Hollywood instead, because I started watching shows like Farscape about 22 years ago, and I just thought, shoot, I want to write about space instead of going into it.
Hmm. It's a lot safer.
Yeah, yeah.
That's real. I never knew that you studied astrophysics. That's
Yeah, that's awesome.
interesting. But yeah, because I was not like super. I mean, like any science fiction fan, I like space and stuff, but I wasn't the kind of person who like memorized all the Apollo missions or the names of all the astronauts or anything like that. So, but this show, but even as a somewhat casual fan of the space program, this show I found it really moving. I mean, I watched half the episodes just with tears in my eyes. There's just something like about it really captures the romance of the space program. And it was funny.
And the dramatic heroics. Jesus.
Yeah.
Well, it's just so masterfully done. I mean, there might be shows that are sometimes more exciting or fun, like Foundation, kind of space opera. But this show is just so damn good. I mean, I've been saying for 2 or 3 years, it's probably the best show on TV. And it's not the first time we've said that about a Ron Moore show. So I don't know. I think that guy's got potential.
he's going places, that guy. Yeah, and it was interesting too, because my wife, I mean, she didn't watch the show with me because I watched 25 hours in 4 days or something like that, and she had other stuff to do. But she would walk through the room, and she's not a huge fan of outer space kind of science fiction, but she's like, this show seems really interesting. She's like, this is the kind of show I would watch because it starts off with this fairly realistic worlds of the kind of the 70s kind of era, and then so if you're someone who's put off by just super science fiction stuff, it kind of eases you into it. And then, by the time you're hooked, then the fusion reactors and all that kind of stuff starts coming in.
Right. And it's fascinating how they keep, at least initially, a lot of stuff that happened in reality, they reference or they kind of go in a slightly different direction. And of course, as the show goes on, we veer more and more away from the sacred timeline, so to speak. But actually, can I talk about one of my few criticisms? Because nothing.
Well, actually, before we get into criticism, I want to. Well, actually, let me just say, I mean, so I basically don't have any criticisms of this show. I basically thought it was perfect. I mean, maybe I could quibble about a couple of things, but I basically loved it. If you're just listening to this and want to know whether you should watch the show or whatever, it's definitely, go watch it and then come back and listen to the rest of this. But I want to get Sarah back in here too. So Sarah, do you share my enthusiasm for this show or not?
Oh yeah. I mean, I grew up on I would repeat watch movies like The Right Stuff. And, because I found it all just so comforting. And it's the same thing that I went through a phase, I think, when I was homeschooled, where I was reading all about polar exploration history, and I got really into Ernest Shackleton. I had a crush on this man. Okay? How can you not? And it's very nerdy. Sarah homeschooling, having a crush on a dead man in in a book. It's a very black and white photograph. But these sort of, I always been very attracted to, these people living in just extreme conditions. And there was something wonderful about being curled up in my bed, reading about these men enduring this horrible, isolating, freezing, frostbitten experience from the comfort of my bed. And there was something really comforting about that. And I felt the same thing about space documentaries. And that kind of launched me concurrently, with growing up on Star Trek. So
yeah, let me just say,
felt like those things were tied together.
Yeah, let me just say, if anyone listening doesn't know who Ernest Shackleton is, he was a polar explorer. And so the Shackleton crater in this show is named after him. Or, that's on the moon is named after him. But there was this awesome, maybe you could reproduce it, Sarah, better than I can, but he put this ad in the newspaper for people to join his expedition. And it says something like...
Men wanted, bitter cold, certain death, basically like, hey, if you're not afraid of death and, coming out and being in the cold, and you might die, then join my expedition. And, his story was so, like, I think the reason why he's the most famous polar explorer is because, he kept all of his men alive. He was trapped, in the ice, living on the ice for 2 years, while World War I was going on in the rest of the world, and brought every single one of his men home, which was extraordinary, for that time. And so, a lot of the people who got to the pole first are not anywhere near as well known because of that human interest story of survival. And so, that whole thing, like whenever I talk to somebody who has not seen For All Mankind, I always say, how did you feel about Apollo 13, the movie?
Mm-hmm.
If you loved Apollo 13 and you want to have that experience over and over and over again, this is the show for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Those guys trapped in the ice with Shackleton, that was probably the safest place they could have been in the world. If the World War I was going on at the time, they probably would have been fighting over in that.
I know. A few of them survived it only to be killed in the war because they joined the war just after they got back.
They should have been trapped a little longer.
I know.
Also, if you really loved Apollo 18, the movie, then this show is not for you.
But so Sarah, but do you basically have no criticism, or do you have some criticisms that we're going to get to?
I mean, there's little nitpicky things in various episodes where I'm like, well, the willing suspension of disbelief was definitely employed there, things like that. But, they're so minor with each thing. I remember feeling those criticisms, sort of float to the surface, but I can't think of a single example of any of them. So that's a good sign.
And John, are you like with us, or do you have any like big criticisms?
Yeah. No, I absolutely love the show. I can't really think of any criticisms that I would levy. I mean, if I'm really being critical, like, I know I commented on like the performance of this one minor actor in the show where I was like, this person is just not really quite up to snuff with the rest of this amazing cast. But I also don't want to just be mean to that one person.
Well, now we all want to know who it is.
I mean, okay. Well, it's just like the kid who plays what Jesus Christ, I just watched 20 hours of the show. What is
Is it
Baldwin?
Danny or Shane?
No. The one that Shane, the one that plays young Shane.
Okay.
Like, that kid is not the best actor. To be fair, he doesn't have a whole lot to work with in the show that we see him. But
isn't there only a young Shane?
I guess there's only a young Shane. Yeah. Fair point. Yeah. Well, no. Well, because there's a teenage Shane and there's the young Shane, like the sort of I don't know, middle grade Shane or whatever.
Oh, I didn't notice that. All right.
Yeah. There's a different kid that plays like the younger version, and then the teenage version that actually, well, spoiler alert, ends up getting hit by a car and dies. But yeah, just the younger one. I felt like not really up to snuff.
Yeah.
I'll admit I completely forgot Shane was ever a character. No, until I revisited season 1 for this podcast, it's so long ago, and it doesn't really factor into the show later that much.
Really, man? Because like I was going to say, like, this is not a criticism. This is just sort of, but it is a bit of a caveat. Is that I feel like if you're told this is like Soviets versus the United States on the moon, you might be picturing sort of a fun show that you're going to come home after work and unwind watching the antics of the of the space adventure kind of stuff. And this show is like often an emotionally grueling experience to watch, and like no more so for me than that part where the some of the main characters have their son hit by a car and brain dead and then die, and like it was really I mean it was really but it was
and their
so emotionally
grapple
affecting
with that for each, like, they continue to grapple with that, right? It affects their entire character arc of both characters. It affects their marriage and everything.
Yeah. So, but it's like effective because it's so well done. So that's not a criticism, but I'm just saying, like, if that's not your, that's not your bag, watching characters really, really suffering, that's the only like big like warning I might give people who are thinking about watching this show.
Yeah.
Okay, but so Rafael, so what was your big criticism that you wanted to mention?
Well, it's funny. For once, my background as a musician kind of ties into this, and there's really nothing they can do about this. But
Oh,
as
yeah.
the timelines start to diverge from reality,
Mm-hmm.
they use a lot of specific songs from certain years to tie into the show to create the mood, and I dig that. But also, those songs wouldn't exist anymore; or they would be different. They
Mm-hmm.
should be
Mm-hmm.
slightly different. Like "Come as You Are" by
Mm-hmm.
Nirvana. That song wouldn't exist in this new timeline. It would be slightly different,
Mm-hmm.
because music is a reflection of the times and culture.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I mean, actually, now that you say that, that would have actually been a really interesting thing to, get some bands or whatever that could like play in the style of various real bands, and then try to, come up with variations on one of the songs, or or
Absolutely.
even just do like a fake song that that sounds like them but is not them.
No, totally.
Um,
I mean, criticism's probably too strong a word, but in the
yeah,
perfect version of this show, they would have had the extra money to hire bands to make fake songs in the
yeah, yeah,
style of the times.
yeah.
Ah.
No, I mean that would have been amazing. Or I mean, actually, even if you could have just done like the slight tweaking to songs, like you're saying, like where like maybe that song would exist, but it wouldn't be exactly the same, and like see like how many people actually even notice,
Hmm.
because like a real Nirvana fan obviously would notice, but like someone who's just a casual fan, like maybe you wouldn't even notice. Um,
Absolutely.
so
And
that
I
would be
guess,
interesting.
it's tough to do in the case of
Yeah,
Nirvana specifically because you can't
right.
get approval. But,
Yeah.
if they could get
Ah,
approval and like the artists were okay with
yeah,
tweaking the songs just a little bit, like the
yeah,
inflection and the way it's sung or something.
yeah. Actually, I wonder if I wonder if they'll subtly just have Kurt Cobain live in once we get to the in the well, no, I guess I don't remember because I've already seen season 3, but because the end of season 2 we see that we're going to the 90s, and that's when the "Come as You Are" song starts playing. So
Right.
um
At the
you
very end
know
of season 2, I
yeah,
believe. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So
All
I
right,
guess they
well,
probably don't make any reference to it because I don't remember it, but
no spoilers for
well,
season 3.
whether or not Kurt Cobain lived is not really relevant to this show.
Yeah, I don't think they've established it yet, so you never know.
He's going to be
But
president in season 5. I mean, it's like.
but
Well,
I mean, what you're saying though, Raphael, about the timelines should be diverging. I mean, that's true of everything related to the alternate history, right? It's like would the
Yeah,
same people have been I mean, like they changed it around a
yeah,
little bit, but it's like would Reagan still have been president or
yeah.
like whatever? Like,
Hmm.
that's sort of an open question.
Right.
Like would these ripples, spread through time? I mean, I heard a really I saw a panel years ago. It was for the Wild Cards Shared World superhero anthology series, which had started in. I think the first story takes place in World War II or something, and then
Yeah. Hit
it
Boy.
goes. Yeah, 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 and then it goes from there. And so, and Daniel Abraham was one of the writers, and he was saying that he thought at the point he joined that the alternate history had diverged too much from reality and kind of become too much its own things to the point where
Hmm.
you couldn't really. It felt just a little sort of disconnected from real life. And so he made the argument that they needed to bring it back closer to the
Mm.
actual timeline. And he had this analogy I thought was really striking, where he said he thought it should be like the double helix of DNA, where the real timeline and the alternate timeline sort of spiraled around each other and stayed, within sight of each other without while still being distinct from each other.
Hmm.
mhm.
Yeah, maybe
And
Nirvana is the same in every universe, man.
Yeah.
It's possible. It is possible.
but so
No,
I,
I
but,
think I
but
think the show does a great job of keeping things pretty similar, just ever
Hmm.
so slightly different.
yeah, but so
Yeah.
I think that's a legitimate question to ask. Like, wouldn't things just diverge more and more over time? But I think just sort of like for the
Hmm.
sake of the audience, I think maybe you
Yeah.
just want it to
Sure.
not be too different.
No, to me, it
I
just
agree.
became a really interesting thing to think about as a thought exercise because art is inherently political, or so they
Hmm.
say. Mine isn't. Mine is just whatever. I mean, there's nothing political about a yeti eating people, but
Fair.
but yeah, if you do believe that, then of course, yeah, movies and TV shows and music would be very different over
Hmm.
time.
I mean, yeah, but it was making me, this alternate history aspect was making me sort of think about, is this like the greatest alternate history TV show of all
Hmm.
time? And so I
Yeah.
Googled alternate history TV shows, and there was a surprisingly small number of them
Yeah.
that came
Yeah.
up. Sort of the first two that came up, in addition to this one, were The Man in the High Castle and The
Yeah.
Plot Against America.
Oh, I
I
never saw Plot Against America, but yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen. I read it's based on a Philip Roth novel, which I did read, but I haven't seen the TV show. But I would say this is definitely better than both of those.
Yeah.
So
well, Man in the High Castle was like fantastic. I thought the first season, but then like I don't know, I kind of lost. Like I don't know if it just lost what it was doing well, or if I just got disconnected from it. But like I don't know, I quit watching it at some point. I don't know if it ever got its footing again, or people continue to like it. But I guess if it's coming up on a list of the best, but how many are there though?
there were only. I just Googled it, and it brought up like 10 or 11.
Really?
And most of them were not really alternate history, in my opinion. I mean, sort of maybe, but not really. Not like this is.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see what else is on the list, because it's like, I couldn't really.
Well, do you have access to Google?
No, I know. I will look it up later, but I'm just saying, I'm not going to do it right now because we're doing a panel, and you don't like the sound of clicky clacky keyboards in the background.
No, that's true. That's true. I appreciate that. But so I'll throw that out there. Does everyone share the perception?
Does everyone have Google? Or no? Okay.
No. Does everyone share the perception that this is the greatest alternate history TV show, or is there something else that anyone?
Yeah, I mean, when you were talking about that, the only one I could think of was, Man in the High Castle. Mm-hmm. And I do think that this is tighter than that show. But I also really like the fact that the stuff that they did change, seemed very relevant to the changes that had been put in place. Like, it's blink and you'll miss it, but they talk about how Chernobyl was avoided because of technology developed in the space program. And how, because we had, more advanced technology, that, this didn't happen. This horrible disaster that was very real in our world did not happen and was narrowly avoided. And then they like show you, one of the original like MTV advertisements where there's like an astronaut with the MTV logo. And,
when that I think it might be in season 3.
That's in season, I think it's the end of season 1. When they, they go back and they say, oh, we're in the 80s now or whatever.
Oh, okay.
But, or it could be the first episode of season 2. But, what's funny about that, the MTV logo, is I remember that logo. But in the context of this show, I see that logo completely differently. So same logo, but different perception because of everything that we know about this, particular history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's like a person on the moon with the flag, right? Isn't that what it is? Yeah. Yeah.
That is interesting. That's a great point.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
I mean, I guess this is another semi-caveat, I guess, very mild, is that I feel like to really enjoy this show to its fullest, you have to have a pretty comprehensive knowledge of history of the relevant time periods. And I feel like a lot of people, like one of my favorite things is that Teddy Kennedy doesn't go to Chappaquiddick, and so therefore there's not this whole scandal, and so therefore he becomes president. And I feel like there's a big percentage of the audience under 30 that has never heard of any of this stuff, and are sort of missing out. Like they'll just hear like Ted Kennedy canceled his trip to Chappaquiddick, and it doesn't mean anything to them.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I think that's certainly true for every alternate history that exists, and that's one of the challenges for that genre. I felt like this show worked pretty well in that regard, although maybe it's just because I just happen to, I've been alive for most of it, and I have been a fan of the space program, so I was sort of more likely to know a lot of that stuff, and then, just all the other stuff was just sort of important world stuff. So like, if you were alive, you probably, were aware of some of that stuff. But I thought they did a really good job of like filling in the gaps that you might have had with like, some of the sort of like fake sort of news conference things, and like, the chatter between like, presidents and whatever, like all that kind of stuff. Maybe one minor caveat is that they kind of maybe leaned on some of that too much, like especially like in the first episode, like I feel like there was it felt like a little bit much of that, but like, to be honest, like most shows would have like given us this whole pointless like prologue bullshit that would have like just been interminable or like made us read a bunch of like slides. And so like the fact that they just trusted us enough to just give us what they gave us, I appreciated.
They really build off real world history in satisfying ways. You know,
Yeah.
like for instance, the story and the episode Nixon's Women, that built on the real life Mercury 13 program. Ron Moore took inspiration from that. Like in reality, it didn't get off the ground, but in this version, and you know what, to answer your question about other alternate history shows, I think this one is unique in one very interesting way. It's the only one we've seen where it presents a better world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think that does kind of make it the
Yeah.
best one.
Well, and
Well,
I think one of the things that a lot of alternate history shows or a lot of alternate history stories do is like they really fixate on like the Civil War or like World War II. Like these are like these big decision points in the world that is very easy to draw these like wildly different worlds to diverge from. But with this, I feel like this is like a really fresh way of doing an alternate history. Like, I mean, it's not the first time. I have seen other things that have done like alternate history associated with sort of space program stuff. And unfortunately, for the author Alan Smale, he actually wrote a book that was very similar to this, like right around the time that this show was coming out. So I mean, he did sell it and it is available. I think it's called Hot Moon, or it was called Hot Moon at some point. He may have changed the title, but so it would have probably seemed much more revolutionary if the show had not come out around the same time.
yeah, but so I didn't realize, John, that you were that into the space program. So did you?
Yeah.
Like, tell us a little bit about your
Sure.
space program.
Yeah, I
fandom.
mean, so my grandparents were really into it, and so like they took me to Kennedy Space Center a couple times when I was a kid, and like I lived in Florida when I was from like age 9 till like 20 something when I went off to college after I graduated college. And so I went to Kennedy Space Center several times. Watched a bunch of like launches, just going outside and seeing launches and stuff. And then actually this sort of happened randomly, but like when I met my wife Christy, she lived in Lompoc, California, and so I ended up moving there. And Lompoc, California is home of Vandenberg Air Force Base, which is mentioned in the show because they launch a lot of rockets from there. And so as I was living in Lompoc, we got to watch a lot of rocket launches like real up close. So yeah, that was really cool too. But it had never been like a thing where I was like a student of it, but it had sort of been a lifelong interest of mine. I didn't ever think I was going to be an astronaut. I thought probably did want to be at some point when I was a kid. I never realistically thought I was going to be as I got older, but I did like study astronomy at some point and thought that like this would be a really interesting thing to go into, but math was too hard.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe I was just thinking this morning, maybe part of the reason I was never that into wanting to be an astronaut and that kind of stuff is like I don't even like roller coasters. So
Yeah.
the idea that I would ever be an astronaut was pretty like not in the cards from a very early age. But actually, so I have here, this is the list of characters in the show who are like real astronauts and stuff like that.
Oh.
So it says, including Apollo 11 astronauts Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins, Mercury 7 astronaut Deke Slayton, rocket scientist Wernher von Braun, astronaut Sally Ride, NASA Administrator Thomas Paine, NASA Flight Director Gene Kranz, U.S. Senators Ted Kennedy and Gary Hart. I forgot about that, yeah. Along with U.S. Presidents Richard Nixon, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, and Bill Clinton. So John, how familiar were you with the NASA people that are real people in this show?
Yeah, I knew a lot of them that you just said. I don't think I knew the name of Deke Slayton. Not sure if there's any other ones that you said that I didn't know, but I didn't know Deke Slayton. I didn't know, and then the administrator Tom Paine, I didn't know his name. But yeah, I knew most of those people.
So there are some also that are based on real people. Like Molly Cobb's character is based on Jerry Cobb, who could have been the first woman. She passed the Mercury. She was in Mercury 13 and passed the same pre-flight tests.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, she's one of the best characters, and I mean they're all good in my opinion.
Yeah,
but
she's
she's
fantastic.
fantastic.
I love them so much.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk more about that, Sarah? Like, what did you think of those, like Molly Cobb and the other characters?
I mean, it's such a refreshing character, the way that she's written, and it's just such a real person. Like she absolutely 100% feels like a real person, as does her husband, and the way that their whole relationship works. That completely buy it, everything about it, because in order for their relationship to work in that time period, it would have to be a little bit countercultural, and they would have to embrace those things and celebrate those things about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so I absolutely love, those two characters.
Yeah, if for people, if you haven't seen the show, she's this very like acerbic astronaut, and I think there's a part fairly near the point where we're introduced to her where she's like, they'll find a way to screw us yet,
Yeah.
just wait for it. She's
Yeah,
sort of has
and
this
I
sort
love
of
that Karen ends up like getting therapy from Wayne.
Yeah.
Like, I would have never put those two characters together but as soon as I saw what they were doing with that, I was like, oh my God, this makes perfect sense, because she's so
Mhm.
high strung and she
Mhm.
desperately needs a Wayne in her life. She desperately needs
Yeah.
yeah. So just, I mean, there's a lot of characters. I don't know if we have time
Yeah.
to really go too deep into them, but so some of the major characters, you've got Ed Baldwin, and then his wife Tracy, or no, sorry, and then his
Karen.
wife Karen Baldwin, and then you've got his buddy, who's sort of the like lovable goofball Gordo Stevens, and his wife Tracy Stevens, who's sort of more sort of driven and ambitious. And then you've got, wait, I have a list here. Ellen, right? Man, there's so many characters. Hold on.
Yeah, Ellen Waverly, who becomes Ellen Wilson.
I gotta say, for a show with this many, characters, and especially over the course of several seasons, some of those, go away and then some come
Mhm.
back. They do such a great job with character development.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
very few characters, if any, ever feel like they're just there to provide filler or there to provide something else for the main characters. That's a wonderful achievement.
Mhm.
Yeah, so you've got so Ellen is sort of a closeted gay woman in this, especially the earlier
Mhm.
seasons where it's like very stressful to be a gay person in government. You have Margot Madison, who's sort of becomes a flight director, and I don't know, she's a complicated character. I don't know if I can sum her up too
Yeah.
quickly. You got Danielle Poole, Danny Stevens, Alita Rosales. So yeah, and they're all, like in my opinion, all really well drawn, well developed characters. And I guess one of the things I really like about the show is that there's a lot of moral complexity to what goes on, and it's not afraid to have characters do to risk having the audience dislike them. Like Ed has serious anger management issues. There's just all sorts of stuff that just feels very, very real in terms of just how the characters fuck up and are put through the ringer and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, but speaking of just the list of characters, and then mentioning Danny Poole, I guess one other criticism I would have is that I wish they had more black characters on the show. Like, there are some other ones besides Danny, but she's the only important astronaut figure in the show that's black. And so I kind of wish that they had incorporated more more black characters.
Yeah.
I think it gets better in season 3, but I don't remember for sure because I didn't rewatch that season. But for season 1, season 2, it's very, very few characters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Although I guess it's like Rafael was saying, that this is a better future. So one thing that's noteworthy is that in actual history there were no female astronauts at all. In this time period. So they're kind of like
one of the things I was half looking for is, I know why they didn't do it, if anyone thought about doing it, because it would have been way too high profile and almost silly. But I couldn't help but think about how when Hillary Clinton was a little girl, like 7 years old, she wrote a letter to NASA saying, I would like to be an astronaut.
Oh.
And they mailed her back I'm sorry, but you're a girl. It sucks to be you, basically. And that experience shaped her, in terms of who she became. And so I was kind of hoping that there would be some little nod somewhere in there that Hillary Clinton became an astronaut instead of becoming a lawyer and having this whole legal career and all of that. But I think that also something like that would be really hard to pull off without being silly.
They could have totally done that just like on the sly by just like making one of those letters that they read to the astronauts like be by like, you know, signed by Hillary.
Yeah.
You know, and without the negative part, like, you know, you wouldn't necessarily even connect it because like, you know, the female astronaut that's literally being read the letter to like would just reply and say something that you know the author would hear.
Yeah.
So yeah, that could have been a little clever little Easter egg.
For sure. They could have done that in a really subtle way, any number of ways. Just even had like H comma Clinton in like a computer
Yeah.
screen on a roster.
Yeah.
Or like Hillary Rodham. I mean, it could have been, you know,
Yeah,
'cause
yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah,
since
right.
it's an
Rodham,
alternate
yeah.
history. How about Raphael? Is there anything jump out at you about any of those characters that you want to mention?
You know, I guess, you know, Ed Baldwin is a fantastic character and, you know, kind of just the all-American guy. But, you know, Joel Kinnaman plays him with a lot of complexity. And like you said, the temper. But you love him for all his faults and everything. And I think he and Karen, especially in season 2, you know, I love the addition of their daughter. And it's a really great family dynamic and, you know, it really pays off. And, you know, I think Chantal Van Santen does such a fantastic job as Karen. I really enjoyed seeing her character change and evolve over time. And, oh, yeah, I don't know. I guess speaking of Ellen, I love her character arc. And I can't say too much yet, but I think, like, the fact that she's gay and she has to hide it for a while. I mean, I think even in season 1, when she's with Deke, that's, like, a really interesting scene when they're stuck in the capsule.
Yeah.
And then I think my favorite
that's so
moment, like emotionally in season 1, is just her and Ed being able to connect, like when he's able to successfully rein her in. And that's just such a great moment towards the end of season 1.
Oh, but speaking of the moment with Deke and Ellen in season 1, that's in episode 10, and so like that's the season finale. So the season finales on this show, man, see the like episode 10 and episode 20, like the 2 season finales, they're so good.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
man, like if you had told me that they were gonna top the season 1 finale with the season 2 finale, I would have told you were crazy. There's no way. But man, they're so good. They're like so dramatic and like so just like sort of original and like just like edge of your seat like kind of TV. Like they're incredible. And then but then they also have these moments like what Raphael's talking about, these like important character moments, these quiet character moments between just 2 characters. It was so good.
Although that does, that the season 2 finale did like fulfill my lifelong dream of just wanting to see like astronauts with M16s.
Yeah.
You know, that, like, why has nobody ever given me that before?
Yeah.
Although that does remind me of one other criticism I have, and I don't think there's really anything they could have done about this, but it was bugging me a little bit how there's like moon gravity outside, but then when they go into the lunar base, it seems to be just Earth gravity. You know.
Yeah.
And you know, I think it would just be too expensive to try to do it. But I do like someday I do want to see a movie set on the moon where there's actual like low gravity inside as well as outside.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think about that. That's true.
Yeah, actually, I'm embarrassed to say I never thought about that either. I guess I thought they must have had some kind of science fictional explanation.
Yeah, this show,
I don't.
I feel like
I mean, there was no
mention
mention of like artificial gravity or anything. I mean, maybe I missed it or there's some reference to it, but I think it was just a production thing.
I mean, I think if anything, they would have like magnetic boots or something, like so that you know the floor would be just made of metal, so that they but still, like there'd be a visual thing that you could observe that if they were actually trying to act like there was lunar gravity, but yeah, they don't do that when they're inside.
Because even with magnetic boots, their coffee would be spilling out.
Yeah. But so just to continue on with the praise for the season 2 finale, like okay, well, first of all, like I love the character arc of Tracy Stevens. Like, you know, she starts off, she's just the wife of Gordo Stevens, the astronaut, and then you know, she gets recruited for the female space program, you know, among Nixon's women, as the episode's called, like she just goes on like such a fascinating trajectory. Like by season 2, it's like she's like a fucking rock star astronaut. Like, you know, she's going on the talk shows, hanging out with like Johnny Carson and stuff. Like, and and really kind of like almost becoming Gordo Stevens, like in his excesses. Like, you know, she's like getting drunk and like sort of sleeping through meetings and stuff. But then by the end, it's like her and Gordo get back together, like kind of right at the end, and then they have to do this fucking epic heroic thing. Like, oh my god. And that was, and like the fact that Ron Moore worked on Star Trek is like very, very, like, you can see the fingerprints all over this part, because it's like them doing that jury rig shit, that is so Star Trek. Like, should we
well,
just
let's
talk
put
about
in a
what
word
it
for
is?
the real hero. Let's put in a word for the real hero here: duct tape. Right?
Yeah, duct tape. Yes. Should we spell out exactly what it is, because it's so fucking dope? I don't know if we should, or if we. Okay, so so like so the Soviets attacked the Jamestown base on the moon, and there's this depressurization thing, and the Americans had snuck this like secret reactor up there to enrich plutonium on the moon, because of course they did, and so when the depressurization event happens, the reactor goes offline, and so they're like, well, the entire thing is going to melt down in like 41 minutes if we don't do something about it. And unfortunately, like, so there wasn't much anyone could do about it, but Gordo and Tracy are stuck in this, in the original Jamestown base. It had expanded a lot. Now it's the galley. And they were sort of illicitly in there, sort of like, she was smoking cigarettes, like using a vacuum thing, whatever, to like try to hide it, but whatever. So they're having this, like, they're like reconnecting. They're stuck in there. This thing happens, right? They then they realize that they can communicate with the old like communication system, which had just sort of been unplugged for all this time since they upgraded this place. And so they're able to communicate with NASA, and they give them some instructions, and they're like, hey, we know what all of the stuff that's in the galley is, and so like, let's get all our big brains at NASA on it and see what we can figure out. And so what they figure out is that they can basically cover every inch of them with duct tape. So they basically make spacesuits out of duct tape, because that's what they had, and they have like some kind of face mask that they can put on them. And it's like they explain in excruciating detail, like, like, oh, well, like, any bit of your skin that is exposed is just going to balloon, and like, and it just sounds like completely awful. And like, you can see like the angst on their face as they're being explained what's happening, what's going to happen to them. And they have like 15 seconds to get from where they are to where this, control panel is on the outside. And it's just like so intense, and it's just incredible. And yeah, just like props to them for like even coming up with that shit.
Right. I mean, even with all the science fiction and space movies and stuff I've seen, there's still stuff in this show where it's like seems fresh and surprising. Like the part where they have to get like a tank of something from one spaceship to the other, and so you're gonna have to just throw it.
Yeah. That was so great.
Very favorite moments.
Yeah.
But yeah, because the show is rooted in reality to a pretty high degree, that was a tremendous sequence, because you pretty much knew Tracy and Gordo were going to die. There was really no version of that, because it would just, in any other TV show, maybe they would just be in the med bay for a couple days and be okay. But no, it's like, this is for all mankind. Come on.
Mm-hmm. We're moving on to the 90s. Got to kill off some of these people.
Yeah.
I want to get Sarah back in here. Sarah, is there anything you've been wanting to say, or any other characters or scenes or anything that you wanted to highlight?
I think that one of the things that I loved about Tracy and Gordo is that their relationship is really complex, because there were times that, you would be forgiven to dismiss Gordo as just sort of this 1970s fuckboy, that is just very self-interested and is going to lose Tracy, obviously, and she's way too good for him and all of this stuff. But then he starts doing all of this tender shit, like, he's genuinely really proud of her when she is able to get through the training program. He sort of gives her the tough love moment when she's thinking about quitting, and, just straight up tells her she's being a coward. And so they have this very genuine, very real, egalitarian relationship, even though obviously Gordo has a lot of problems that ultimately leads to, them being apart for a bit. But, and Tracy herself is also super complex, because you would think that she's one way, and then like the thing when Karen's son dies, when Ed is up on the moon by himself, she is Tracy is just so kind to her. She is 100% there for her, and she's sort of the one that cares the most. of all of the, the sort of astronauts' wives that are surrounding Karen at that time, she's being the most genuine, and she's, completely pushing off her other responsibilities and the things that she needs to do in order to be there for Karen. And so, I love the fact that these characters, every time you think that you're going to write them off as some kind of caricature, you're wrong, and they're going to come back around and be real again in a new way and in a refreshing way. And I absolutely love that about this show.
Oh yeah. Can I talk about one of my favorite moments real quick, which is because one of the things that, I would have found really hard to do is speaking of Gordo, when essentially he's having, a mental breakdown, and Ed decides he needs to go back to Earth. Danielle deliberately breaks her arm to provide the reason for that. I was like, wow. I don't know if I could actually do that if I had to.
Yeah. And then she pays for it.
Big time.
It's not like, secretly everybody knows what happened and it's fine and it's okay. Like, she continues to pay for that decision for multiple seasons.
Also, I did love that Ed just got stuck on the moon alone. And then, of course, Ellen is on the moon alone. And I don't know, sometimes as a writer, I think that would be pretty fantastic.
They get a lot of work done up there.
Yeah, I mean, talk about finally some peace and quiet.
Yeah, and nothing but episodes of the Bob Newhart show. I mean, like, of course you're going to focus on your work. Like, you get sick of that real fast.
Okay, actually, have you guys heard how this show came about? Because this has the most amazing origin story for a science fiction show you've ever heard. No, nobody heard this?
No,
Okay,
nothing matching that build up, Dave. So
okay,
tell us.
So there's this real life astronaut named Garrett Reisman, and so he was on the International Space Station, and he was watching Battlestar Galactica. In his downtime, he was watching Battlestar Galactica. And so one of the perks of being a NASA astronaut is they say, are there any celebrities you want to talk to while you're up in space? And so he says, I'd love to talk to the guys who created Battlestar Galactica. And so NASA kind of set up a Skype call with Ron Moore and David Icke. And so they talked. And then when Garrett Reisman came back to Earth, he went and watched them film the last episode of Battlestar Galactica and had a bit part in it.
You had to watch that one?
He was very tactful about it. But so anyway, so he kind of got to know Ron Moore through that. And then years later, Ron Moore, calls him or emails him or whatever and says, I have an idea I'd like to bounce off you. And so they meet up, and Ron Moore says, so I'm thinking about doing a show about NASA in the 70s, or maybe make it like an alternate history thing where we start off that way, but then it like diverges from actual history. Like it's like one or the other. And so Garrett Reisman says, well, like when I was in Russia, I saw their lander, their lunar lander that they built that they never used. And he's like, most people don't realize how close the Russians actually came to beating us to the moon. And so they started talking about like, well, what if that had happened? Like then this would have happened and this would have happened. And so that's, where the show's origin was. And then he actually hired Garrett Reisman to be their technical consultant for the show. So
that's incredible.
That is fantastic. And I was just about to say,
I can't believe I haven't heard
some
of this.
Credit. Yeah.
That is absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
So wait, they hired a technical expert and they listened to him? That doesn't sound like Hollywood.
It was funny because I know all this because there was an interview I watched with Garrett Reisman, and he said, like most of the time, like they say they want to get it right, but then they don't really care, But he's like, this one they really really do. But he's been in the writers' room every episode, like since the beginning, like Oh,
that's great.
So,
wow, that's really cool.
And I'll just mention because I did a little research. The other like co-creators are was it Matt, Ben Nadivi and Matt? Wait, shoot, it's like Walpe or something like that. But anyway,
Matt Wolpert and
Wolpert,
Ben Nadivi.
Yeah, so they met at
guys?
So they met at NYU Film School and kind of helped each other out with their thesis projects. And then I think it was Ben moved out to Hollywood and got a job on My Name is Earl. And they just started like writing together on different projects. And so they've worked on Entourage, Fargo, and The Umbrella Academy together. Nice. And
well, you can definitely see a lot of fingerprints of My Name Is Earl and Entourage, so that really makes a lot of sense.
So wait, let's circle back to one thing real quick.
Wait, let me just wrap up that. So they wanted to do like they had tried to get a show going about Werner von Braun, and so they like knew a lot about that, and so somehow they were like somehow they got connected, I think, with Ron Moore to do some sort of Western thing that never happened. But then I guess he brought them on for this, probably because
they were going to do a show about like Operation Paperclip.
Yeah, I think so. Or I don't know if it was about that, or it was somehow involving the Nazi scientists who were, sort of integral to the U.S. space program.
Sweet.
So
I could totally see somebody making a show about Operation Paperclip. So that's why.
No, that would be super cool too. Yeah. Okay, so Rafael, what were you gonna say?
Oh yeah, no, I just wanted to touch back on this Battlestar Galactica ending that y'all don't like. I'm mostly kidding. But yeah, Ron Moore's always made some great space shows. Do you guys even remember Virtuality? Very, very short-lived. But I was lucky enough to speak with him about it about a year ago. I went to a screening for All Mankind, and he's like, "Oh wow, no one's asked me about that for a long time." But I had to ask him about where the show was going to go.
Yeah, I saw that when it came out, and I thought it was really great. And then it's like I think it aired on Fox, and it's like it seemed like they were determined to kill it as soon as it was on, because it was like it kept like moving nights or something, or like maybe, or I don't know, like it seemed like it was sabotaged. However they aired it, I don't remember now, but yeah, like what happened with that show?
Yeah, well, basically they only did 2 episodes,
okay.
But I have it on DVD. They just released it as a movie.
Oh, okay, yeah, gotcha.
But
and I see here, I didn't realize that Nikolaj Coster-Waldau, or I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Yeah,
but
Coster-Waldau.
The guy, the guy from Game of Thrones. I didn't realize he was in that. I guess that was before I knew who he was.
He was in a lot of promising shows that kept getting canceled before Game of Thrones.
Yeah. Then his hand got canceled really fast, so it's like, he...
Let's see. I'll also, I guess, just mention one thing I didn't realize until I did research was there's this scene where when Danielle Poole is being kind of held captive in Star City in Russia, there's this like, crusty guy who comes in and like drinks vodka with her and stuff. And so that guy is actually, Korolev, I think is his name. And so actually the divergence point, I don't think it actually says this explicitly in the show, but Ron Moore has said that the divergence point between this alternate history and ours is that this guy Korolev was the head of the Soviet rocket program, and he died at some point before the moon landing. He sort of went in for like minor surgery and ended up dying, and the Soviet rocket program kind of never recovered from that. And so the divergence point is that he lives and sort of, continues the progress of the Soviet rocket program. But so if you were wondering who that guy was, because I wasn't totally clear, that's who that was.
In some sci-fi shows, you'll hear like a Korolev drive, and even in Star Trek, there's a Korolev class of ship.
I guess one other thing I saw is that Ron Moore said is that when he was originally... and he's like a big fan of the space program too. Like it seems like he really knows his stuff. So you can tell like all the creators, this wasn't just like, they got assigned to do this and they were just, punching the clock or whatever. Like this is something they're all really passionate about. But he said that, like when he was originally thinking of just doing a show about NASA in the 70s, like a Mad Men in space kind of thing. Like part of the reason that he didn't want to do that is because he's like, it's just sort of like depressed. Like what actually happened is kind of depressing,
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, like what would it be? He's like, so I decided to make a show like, oh, like what would have happened if the space program turned out the way I thought it was going to when I was a kid, that would be.
Yeah. I think that really explains the appeal in a nutshell.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like that's just, when you put it that way, it's like, that's like the perfect sell line for the show. It's like, yeah, hell yeah, I'll watch that. Yeah. and they deliver exactly on that promise. It's incredible. I mean, aside from like the best alternate history show, I mean, this is honestly like, this is in the conversation of like best science fiction shows ever. Like it's incredible.
Yeah.
So what kind of reviews and like commentary and stuff like that have you guys seen about this show? Like, is everybody as into it as we are, or like have you seen any criticism or like whatever?
Across the board, it seems to be pretty lauded. I mean, I'm surprised it hasn't won a Peabody like Get Battlestar did. I've only honestly ever seen one real criticism, but I'll only kind of half allude to this because we'll talk about it more next time. You know, it regards Danny Stevens. You know, basically, once he sleeps with Karen in season 2, it does kind of, from that point forward, his character arc is a little questionable, but we can save that mostly for the season 3 discussion.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, no spoilers. I don't know anything about. I don't know anything about what happens after that.
Yeah, I mean, coming in, like, speaking of that, it's like I do have some quibbles. I think maybe for season 3. No, I'm not going to say them now, obviously, but I mean, yeah, like just remembering some of the stuff that happens in there, you're like, yeah, I can think of some things that I'm like, well, I didn't love that, but it's not like it's something wrong. It's just that it's maybe I didn't enjoy
and
that.
And of course,
as much
obviously,
as,
the seeds for that are planted in season 2. You know, so
yeah.
Karen and Danny sleeping together, not my favorite plot point.
Sure.
It was interesting because on Rotten Tomatoes, season 1 is 74%, which seems like ridiculously low to me.
Yeah.
And then, but then seasons 2, 3, and 4 are like 100. It's like 198, 100 or something like that.
That's really shocking to me.
So I don't know if that's just like all the people who didn't like it stopped watching, and so then it's only like the people who like it are reviewing the later seasons or something.
That makes sense.
Well, it could also be a little bit of the phenomenon that, you know, TV critics are usually only given a few episodes to watch. You know, they don't get to see the entire season. So when you're reading like those Rotten Tomatoes reviews, they're usually just basing them off the first 2 to 3 episodes. So I think, you know, you watch the first 2 to 3 episodes of season 1, maybe it's not exactly like a 10 out of 10 show right out of the gate, but by the end of season 1, you're like, holy shit, this is a 10 out of 10 show.
Yeah.
How about...
no, I mean, I thought it was 10 out of 10 in the first episode. I thought the first episode's amazing, but as good as I thought season 1 was, I actually think season 2 is actually better because it's like it really. I mean, I think maybe because it becomes so much more science fictional, like so much more divergence, so much more like actual space stuff that is like, you know, like I love that stuff. So that's part of it. But I mean, it just seems like it really ups the ante in every way, in every way that's good. Yeah. Anyway,
how about Sarah? Did you follow any online discussions or anything?
I just remember being very worried when it came out because I was like literally pleading with people to watch this show because I desperately wanted it to have, you know, all of the seasons. And I had read somewhere, I'm not sure if I read this later on, but that, you know, they have a whole planned 7-season arc and I want to see every bit of it. And so I remember when it came out, I was just like, why am I the only person talking about this show? You know, and I was like begging people to watch it. So I think that was just sort of also like the weirdness of the pandemic and things that were going on at that time. So
well, it took us 4 years to get Dave to do an episode about it.
Yeah.
Well, thank God it's on Apple TV Plus because they don't cancel shows quickly. I mean, even that Jason Momoa show C got 3 seasons and no one was watching it. I loved it, but I couldn't find anyone that was watching it.
I was watching.
Thank goodness this show isn't on Netflix. It'd be gone already.
I know. Yeah.
Fucking Netflix.
I'm still bitter about the OA. Only 2 seasons. Come on.
That was a really good show.
In 1899.
Yeah.
Yeah. The OA hurt. I mean, were you on that? You were on that panel, Rafael, or
I think I was. Yeah. No, seasons 1 and 2.
Sarah,
yes, I was.
Sarah was. Yeah. No,
I'm still upset about it. I'm still waiting for her to like release the rest of the story as a novel or something.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that was actually before they were canceling everything all the time. So it was even worse back then.
Yeah, because there was a pretty big, it seems, fan campaign to. I don't know if people have just sort of given up.
They had the numbers, they had the viewership, but that some, you know, they decided to make decisions algorithmically. And you know, it wasn't bringing in enough new subscribers, which is an insane metric because if you're the kind of person that loves Stranger Things, for example, you're probably the same kind of person who loves the OA. And so judging a show by that metric is completely stupid.
It's very peculiar because it almost seems like they have opposite strategies. Like Netflix is like, oh, you love this show? Well, too bad, we're canceling it. Apple's like, no one's watching it. Well, we're going to keep making it until you do.
Well, it's a smarter business decision because, you know, what Netflix is doing is very penny wise, pound foolish.
Yeah.
And I think Apple TV is smart enough to look at the long game and say, hey, if we finish this show, we can keep making money off of it in perpetuity.
Yeah.
And that is such a smarter way of doing stuff like this because they're aware that, you know, shows go through ebbs and flows of popularity. There's, you know, cult classics like you want something like The Princess Bride was a financial flop when it came out, you know, and I remember seeing that show in the theater and thinking that it was the greatest thing I've ever seen. So I was like, you know, I don't know, I was like 7 years old or something.
Yeah.
And from my perspective as a kid, I thought everyone has seen this. Everyone understands how amazing this is. And then only as an adult, you know, I realized that it was considered an absolute failure at the time. And now it is a classic.
Yeah.
And you got to give shows a chance to catch on because a lot of them don't until the third or fourth season. And then everyone's because, I think with For All Mankind, it really became a pop culture thing in the last 2 years, but not the first 2 years.
Yeah. Well, let me say, I mean, I'm definitely hoping if they have a 7-season plan or whatever, that they're able to do the whole thing. Although, I mean, you know, it does make you wonder. I mean, the fact that they have been able to do alternate history of the past doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work as well. Getting into the, you know, like if they pass the present, I mean, and especially if it gets more and more sci-fi, I mean, that becomes exponentially more difficult to, you know, to make it all seem real and you know, it's a big,
for sure,
ambitious, challenging thing.
Oh no!
To Sarah's point,
now I'm more afraid that there's going to be another fumble at the goal line.
But yeah, to Sarah's point, I mean, I really hope he gets to do it because clearly his intention is to kind of essentially thematically lead to the Star Trek future. Like if he gets to do all 7 seasons, that's where it's heading, you know?
Yeah, and you know, one of the things I was just thinking about regarding the sort of Netflix model and stuff, it's like one of the other things that seems like just ridiculous about that thinking is that like so many shows right now. There's like so many shows coming out like every freaking day. It seems like it's impossible to keep up with shows. Like you need more time to be able to like find time to actually sit down and watch these things. Like I mean, this show existed for 4 years and Dave didn't, you know, take time to watch it. Like it just didn't come to the forefront.
Although in my defense, I have heard that this was good for years, and it's been on my you know my list to watch for years. But I got married this year, and so I'm so far behind on. I haven't watched anything. You know.
No, but see exactly this is the point though, that like even a science fiction super fan nerd like you knew that it was good, had it on your radar. You hadn't gotten to it yet. These things need time to like be around for everyone to find it.
I was going to say, Dave, in your defense, what kind of defense is that? Everyone kept telling you how great it was, and you waited for 4 years anyway.
Yeah, well, no, but I also do this you know, so I'm like doing stuff all of it, you know, and there's like so much stuff to cover. So, I mean, you know.
The point is that these companies do not seem to understand that people have a finite amount of time, a specific amount of time to watch television. And that doesn't really change. Like, you know, if I'm super, super obsessed with a show, I might alter my viewing habits slightly by, you know, watching 2 episodes per evening instead of 1. But other than that, finite amount of time. And most people are like that. You know, you have your viewing habits. You have, and it's a good thing because otherwise we'd all be literally sitting on our butts all day long. You know, it's not healthy. You can only sit in front of a screen for so many hours a day. And, you know, they need to realize they've hit a critical mass with these new shows. And instead of focusing on quantity, focus on quality.
Yeah.
But I mean, what I was reading, it is encouraging though, that I mean, like, you know, I guess in the past they've announced, you know, that they've renewed it for another season kind of midway through the current season. So hopefully there'll be an announcement about season 5, you know, in the next, you know, couple weeks.
Sarah talking about how you can only watch so many hours of TV a day, and I'm like Homer Simpson back into the hedges.
But also I saw the guys I mentioned, Ben and Matt, they just gave them like additional development deals, you know, Apple did. So I mean, it's a little hard for me to believe that they would give them deals for other shows and cancel this one. So it seems pretty, you know, pretty likely that it's going to continue.
The biggest
hopefully-
challenge that they're going to have is the generational aspect of it. I mean, they've certainly done a great job so far, but
Yeah.
we're getting to a point now where by season 5, I can't really imagine anyone from season 1 still going to be around. I mean, maybe, but not by season 6 or 7. Joel Kinnaman was perfect casting because
Yeah.
in season 1, in real life, he was 38 playing a 38-year-old.
Mhm.
But I mean, like Dave said, it's not a spoiler. We all know the show advances a decade every season. So, at some point it's like, well,
They have been very kind to he and Karen
Yeah.
about, like, they give him a little bit of salt and pepper in the hair. They
Yeah, yeah.
otherwise, like, I'm like,
Oh,
come on, tell me what their skincare is like in that time period, please.
oh, he's the spryest 72-year-old I've ever seen.
Yeah.
No, Sarah,
Well,
once
that's one of
once
the
we have
other
fusion
amazing-
power, you wouldn't believe
Yeah.
the skin products
Yeah.
that come out of that.
It's one of the other amazing advances.
Um,
Oh, I was gonna say though, with with the problem of like the just the amazing amount of content that's out there, is like the other thing is that people also rewatch shows a lot. Like when season 4 of a show like this comes out, like maybe I'm gonna spend some time rewatching seasons 1 through 3. So that's also only gonna delay us finding all of the new shows. Like
Yep.
when Dave was saying, and it's like, I know Dave, you end up binging shows, or maybe I don't know how often you actually rewatch, or if you're just doing everything.
no,
on
I don't
first
have
watch
time
most
to
of the
rewatch
but-
TV these days. No way.
Yeah. But so a lot of people do though, and so it's like that makes it even harder, and we need
I
time for
delayed
these shows to
watching
thrive.
season 4 for this show, okay?
Yeah,
Because I was like, I need to rewatch season 1 because it's been so many years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I, they didn't get my little viewership tick. But
Yeah.
after tonight, we're starting season 4. So
Right.
I'll also just mention in this interview I watched with Ronald Moore, he said that there was this show. I don't know. I'm curious if anyone has ever heard of this. I hadn't, called Centennial. That was kind of a inspiration for this, but apparently I think it was maybe in the 70s or something. But it tracks like what happens in this town over generations, and so like from like Indians and pilgrims, I think, and stuff like that, up through the present, so you see like, oh, these these characters have kids, and then you follow their kids, and they have kids, and you follow their kids. So,
oh wow, Dave, you're giving me flashbacks to our dark discussions.
yeah, that got pretty complicated. But yeah, just how ambitious this is. Like, I can't even, I'd never heard of that show, and I can't think of any other show that's tried to show such a big span of time like that,
Yeah. I mean, even books that try to do that are few on the ground, and it's a lot easier to do in a book.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's just like a really ambitious, like striking, original kind of show in a lot of ways, along multiple, angles.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're pretty close to being out of time, so I guess it really is a good thing that we didn't try to also talk about seasons 3 and 4 in this conversation. But so maybe we should start getting into some final thoughts. So Sarah, any other final thoughts on seasons 1 and 2 of the show?
I don't really have anything specific. Well, I do say I want to defend the decision to put Danny and Karen together, because I think that there was some commentary on grief there, and that was the emotional center of why that happened. I'm just going to leave that, at that, because I feel like that's a decision that didn't necessarily make a lot of sense to a lot of viewers. And I'm not saying I would do the same thing, because especially after rewatching season 1 and seeing her literally babysitting this child, it's it's like, oh my God. But I think that what they were doing with that decision was ultimately a really smart commentary on grief, and just in terms of seeing these female characters as whole people, full people. They're complicated. They're allowed to be as complicated as the men. And that's a very, very good marker of a good show.
I mean, I would want to rewatch the season and see, but sort of my read on it at this moment is that she was just like never really okay with Ed putting her in this position of making her worry about him so much for so many years. And there was this kind of like resentment over that sort of just built up year after year after year after year. And it was
I think it was, that was part of it. I think that that's kind of what made that plot detail work for me, is that it worked on multiple levels, especially since she was doing it for very different reasons than he was doing it.
Yeah, but that was rough though, when he's just like, okay, and now we can get a place together, and like,
yeah.
Like, oh no,
Yeah.
oh no.
That's the realism coming in, man.
Yeah.
That's why it was great. It's like, girl, what did you do?
Danny's like, can we get another divergence point here where this goes differently?
Okay, so John, final thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just reiterate that I think this is one of the best science fiction shows probably ever. Certainly the best alternate history show. And everybody watch it. Get all your friends to watch it, because we got to get those 7 seasons.
Yeah, and I'll say, like, I mean, I remember when we did our Watchmen panel, I was kind of like, okay, I totally forgive Damon Lindelof for the ending of Lost. Now, he's totally redeemed himself, and I feel like the same way with Ronald Moore. Yeah. I'm like such a Ronald Moore fan after watching this now, and all of that, like you said, all that stuff that happened in the past, we're just gonna move past that. We're just not even gonna worry about that anymore.
Honestly, the existence of this show is I forgive Ron Moore for the fact that I think what he did is he took some steps away from Outlander, because Outlander started to get really bad. And I think it's because Ron Moore stepped away from Outlander in order to focus on this show. So I forgive him for making Outlander kind of, amazing opener, and then it just trailed off into oblivion.
Yeah, I haven't seen Outlander, but I did see internet commentary saying that it declines after he went away. So that's consistent with my understanding of the situation.
Yes, but he had to sacrifice that for this show, and so I forgive him.
Okay.
Seems like a worthy sacrifice.
Raphael, final thoughts.
Sarah's right about Outlander. Strong start, then it didn't maintain it. Final thought is Ron Moore needs no forgiveness or redemption because Battlestar no, real talk. I need my 7 seasons of For All Mankind, so please watch For All Mankind and Foundation and Silo. We got to keep these shows going.
Yeah. Again, Apple TV Plus really killing it. Severance also awesome.
Oh yeah.
God,
so good.
No, Apple TV Plus is the best app, and I'm a PC Android guy, so I am like the anti-iPhone shill. Trust me.
But yeah, no, I was blown away by how good this was. I mean, I thought it was I heard it was good, and I was expecting to enjoy it, but I was like, wow, this is way better even than I was expecting. So yeah, definitely if you're a science fiction fan, if you have any interest in the space program or alternate history or anything like that, like you just got to watch the show, like 100%, no question. And
even if you just like dramas, come on.
Yeah, if you like Mad Men in space, you got that, So yeah, and definitely
the acting and the writing is just sensational on this show.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah, and then definitely looking forward to talking to you guys about seasons 3 and 4. Can't wait to, because I just heard I couldn't avoid all spoilers in my research, so I heard about some awesome thing that happens at the beginning of season 3, so I sort of restrained myself from watching it, but probably as soon as I get off the call here, I'll go check that out.
I have many opinions.
Well, David, when you run out of new shows to review, let's go back and revisit Battlestar Galactica season 4.
We're just tearing the scab off, or reopening those old wounds. No, we can do that. That'd be fun. But
I mean, we'd have a great time for 99%
of it. Yes, that's good. All right, so let's wrap things up there. So we've been speaking with John Joseph Adams, Sara Lynn Michener, and Rafael Jordan. So thanks everyone so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
See you next time.
Das Vidanya.
And that was our panel. So big thanks again to John Joseph Adams, Sara Lynn Michener, and Rafael Jordan for joining us on the show. This episode of Geek's Guide to the Galaxy was made possible thanks to support from listeners like you. So if you enjoyed the show and want it to continue, please support us on Patreon over at patreon.com/geeks or via PayPal over at geeksguideshow.com/crowdfunding. All right, so that was our show. So thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.
The Geek's Guide to the Galaxy is a production of Wired.com. For more information about the show, Visit geeksguideshow.com to learn more about your host. Visit davidbarrkirtley.com. Music and voiceover produced by yours truly, Jack Kincaid. If you enjoyed this program, tell your friends. If you didn't enjoy it, tell no one. Thank you for listening.